Hey guys, Wintermute here, and today, in the third part of this tutorial series, we'll be adding some more detail to our mesh. So right now, we basically have a blockout that's rigged so we can do some cool stuff with it. However, it doesn't look too good, so we're going to have to add some detail. So first, what you want to do is hide this armature because it's kind of in the way. So you just got to select the whole object. Preferably in object mode, that seems like a good idea, and then hit H. Let me turn on my key screencasting. Alright, so we have our base model, and now we have to add details to it. There are maybe a couple ways to go about doing this, but I think one of the most important things about this tutorial series is that you need to think about what you're doing. So like, I'm the sort of person that used to just randomly add details everywhere, and that, while it might look cool, it doesn't really create much of a sense of coherence, and I think that's kind of cheapens your work. So what you might want to do in order to enhance the sort of character of your model is to add details that actually make sense. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's think about how this thing works. So it's like it's a robot with like a gun on its head. So what does it need? Well, it probably needs something to power these legs, and so we can maybe run some wires coming out of this armor plating out here. You also probably need some like hydraulics to this arm, so we'll add some more cables along this area. And we can assume that this middle block is sort of the mainframe of the whole thing, so we want to have most of our cables connecting there. This top area is pretty empty, so why don't we add some more armor plating to this too? And yeah, maybe we also want to add some exhaust to the robot so we can add some like ventilation like slits in the sides. So there are a couple major tools we want to use for adding detail to a mesh like this. The first is the bevel tool. So let's say we want to carve out a piece of this. What we want to do is we can first loop cut it twice, and then we'll select these two edges and hit Ctrl B. This basically bevels it. It flattens it at an angle that's 45 degrees to the normal, just like this. And that's a pretty cool look, I think. It's used in the industry because sharp corners tend to concentrate force, so we don't want to have them, and as such we want to make sure we have fewer sharp corners. And if you look around, there aren't really any true sharp corners anywhere. They're all beveled, otherwise if you touch them, they might cut you. So we want to bevel things, but we don't want to go too far. Like, sometimes sharp corners are okay, so like here, maybe we have a very slight bevel, but we don't want to go overboard. Now this was something of an accident when I started modeling this, because you can see it doesn't actually have a wall, so at this point it has a infinitesimal thickness, so we can fix that by beveling here. And now we get sort of a surface underneath. Alright, so another tool we're going to be using is the knife tool. Now, the knife tool just as you might imagine, cuts into surfaces. So this is pretty blank, and if we wanted to like add like cuts into this, we'd have to like inset it and then extrude it and like do all sorts of weird stuff. But if you want to just draw a face into it, you can do that. So we want to hit K, and let's carve out like this sort of trapezoidal area. So we'll just select here. Now you can see this isn't bound. You generally want to turn on like magnetic locking for this, so you just hit C and then it will fix to some 45-degree increment according to your screen space. So we'll just extrude it like this. And we'll attach it back. Don't worry if that isn't perfect. And now the most important thing is not to right click, otherwise you'll just lose this. So what you want to do is hit space, and it will insert your work. Now I know the topology around this is kind of bad. I'm not going to go into how to clean that up because I don't really know myself. But if you wanted to try to fix this, I suppose you could just delete these faces and try to retopologize it. So maybe we can like do this, select loop cut this bottom edge. Generally when you're modeling things you kind of want all quads because those are a lot easier to manipulate, and you can actually loop cut those. You can't loop cut triangles, that is. So we have 3 edges here, so we can loop cut this edge 3 times. That's a couple too many. Oh well. Oops. You want to go into vertex mode for this. It's too many loop cuts. Oh. You can check at the bottom how many loop cuts you're actually making. Great, so now we'll just bridge all of these. And we have a slightly better looking mesh, like geometry wise. Can't really do too much on it because we have a lot of n-gons around, but that's alright. That's just for demonstration. Okay, so what we want to do is just sort of inset this inwards. So just hit the extrude key, E, and just push it inwards. And you can see this is on both sides as we still have the mirror modifier active, which is great. Now, let's say we want to put some ventilation slits down here. So a great way to do this is with the bool tool. So what you want to do is just create a cube. You want to scale it down, and we're just going to move it to the surface. And what we're going to be using this cube for is to cut out sections. So we want to cut out like these little rectangular slices. We want to make them pretty thin. And we want to sort of center it on this edge, this face, sorry. Alright, so instead of duplicating this all the way down, one thing we can use is the array tool. So this offset is based on the world axis, so this will offset along the x-axis, the second one on the y, and we want to set it across the vertical axis. In Blender, that's the z-axis, so we're going to scale this up. Increase this number a little bit, maybe have it at -2. And the negative just means it's going downwards relative to this object, and then we can increase the count to get more of these. Okay, we also don't want to cut like across this edge because that looks kind of bad. So what we want to do, in order to manipulate this, because you can see we can't actually alter any of the other pieces because they all get altered, what we want to do is apply this, not in edit mode. So apply it like that. Now we want to shift these faces in. The hard way to do this would be to do each of the edges individually, like that. But the easy way is to turn on proportional editing. So you can either click this button or you can hit O. And you can change the modes, so I'm okay with this normal fall off smooth. And you can use the scroll wheel to change that. Now if you want this to be like a sharper edge, maybe you want to use a linear fall off. So you'll create something like this. Now, how do we actually cut this into the mesh? Well, you need to have bool tools enabled, or you can just straight up use the boolean, but I think bool tools is much better. So you want to hit Ctrl Alt U. Nope, that has been changed in Blender 2.8 yet again. So go to Preferences, Add-ons, and you want to search up bool tool. So make sure this is enabled, so click that checkbox if it's not clicked. And you can see that the hotkey is Ctrl-Shift-B, so we're going to hit that now. Actually, no, first, how do we use this? So it's just a quick way to access the Boolean modifiers and to have objects like actively be Booleans. So first you want to select the object that you're going to cut with, and then you're going to select the object that you're going to cut. So we're cutting these vents into this robot piece, and you have to make sure they're intersecting, otherwise this is pointless. And you're going to go hit Ctrl-Shift-B, and since we're cutting, we use the difference tool. And there you go, we have some vents. Now you'll notice that this doesn't appear on the other side, and the reason that is because it's getting mirrored before it's getting cut. So you want to move this up, and you can see that now it gets cut before it's mirrored, and it appears on both sides. Great. Now this top part. So this presents a couple challenges when we want to manipulate it. For one, it's not on any of the axes. The face normal is 45 degrees to let's see, the y-axis. So we can actually move things along this. It's not possible. So also make sure you disable proportional editing later, because that might screw you up. So how do we, like, let's say we want to carve another trapezoidal plate. So how are we going to do that? Well, one option is to use the edge tools, which is accessed by Ctrl E, and then you want to hit edge slide with the actual edge selected. And now we can slide it along the face, which is pretty useful, and this will definitely come in handy if your object is not positioned, or the edge you're trying to manipulate is not along one of the 3 major planes. So you want to do this. Let's make another loop cut right here. And then we want to edge slide this again. Something like that. And now, you should notice that trying to cut into this mesh is probably not a good idea. What I mean by that is that we can extrude these into the mesh. But I think a better way to do this so we don't actually interfere with any of the geometry underneath the mesh is to extrude it outwards, like that. So just select the opposite of what you want to extrude, and then we'll extrude it outwards. It's like that. Now you can bevel these edges again if you want. So for a more like coherent sort of look. And you can do more cuts to your heart's content. Now for the pipes, or I guess the cables. So let's have like an array of pipes cables coming down along this line that supposedly, like, maybe they're the data and power lines for the legs. So let's have an array of them connecting to this. So what we want to do is carve out an area and have that be like the port section. So how do we do that? We want to use the knife tool again. So we just take some cuts here. We can scale this down a little bit. Maybe want to make it rectangular so we can set the scale on the z-axis to 0 on both of these. Actually, you know what? Maybe that's not a good idea. Why don't we have the scale, the rotation match? Roughly. And then let's extrude this inward so we have like a port section. Great, now for the cables. So this is really easy. All you have to do is make a curve. Make a Bezier curve. If you don't know how to change the location of the cursor, you just go to N, Tool, View, 3D Cursor, right click on it, and reset all the default values. You can hit Alt-G to also move this to the center of the world. So I'm going to have them stick out of like this section and turn 90 degrees and go into that. So it's pretty simple. Also, one thing you want to do when you're working with this curve is to actually be able to see it, because this is going to render to nothing right now. So go to the Geometry tab and increase the depth. There you go, you have a cable. As easy as that. You can rotate these segments and you can change the size of them to alter the sort of tightness of the curve. And basically, this is a bit finicky, but you just want to do some rotations. And eventually you get it. If you need another sort of vertex or like curve point in between these, you can hit right click and then you can subdivide, and then you'll have another thing to work with, another segment. And we didn't actually need to do that, so we might as well just delete the other one. And we'll just have it fit sort of flush in that cavity. We can move this up, so we can imagine we had them like all along the side of this. We have the same problem here, so we actually want to bevel this edge again, like we did in the front. And you probably want to center this too. Great. So let's just duplicate this a couple times. You can hit Shift R, by the way, to repeat whatever actions you've just made. And there you go. I have some cool looking cables coming out of it. So I'm just going to join these all into one object with Ctrl J, just so we don't have so many objects in our scene. Let's say we want to space this more evenly, so we can hit scale from the median point, so it's going to scale starting from the middle, and S. That's not working. Alright, never mind, I guess I'll just place them individually. We'll just do this. So we have a more random looking layout. Now since our origin is almost at the center, we can Shift D, S, X -1, and it will reflect it on the X-axis. And all we need to do is just move it there, just a little bit so it's more centered. And now we have the same cables on both sides of our mesh. Great. Now if you want to make some more modifications, go ahead. I'm just going to go for a speed cap of the rest of my modeling, and I'll talk to you when I'm done with this. Jokes, me from the future here. I actually suggest that you try to go through the modeling yourself of a couple more components. Add some curves to connect the arm and the leg sections, and also make a couple more like bevel modifications to the sides of the armor. If you are having trouble, you can always watch my video, but I suggest you try to figure out how to do this yourself, as it's good practice. Okay, for real this time. I'll see you when I'm done. Hope you managed to use some of those techniques to add a couple more details to your mesh. My mesh looks like this, though I've actually recorded this tutorial a couple of times to add some more stuff in, and it's always looked different. If you're ever having a hard time thinking of ideas of what to do with these, you can my suggestions are that you can either search on the internet for references as to models, or you can look at the actual function of the piece and what you think it should do, or what kind of functions do you think this robot should have? Like an exhaust system, a power system, like a control system, a defense system. You know, like you can think about all those systems, and you can think about what kind of geometry do I need to reinforce that system exists. So for example, for that power system, we have some vents, maybe for like some fans inside the machine to come out, and we have these cables to like communicate the power in between the different parts. And yeah, that's about it. Now, if you have some trouble with this, you could try to follow my model, but I actually suggest you don't try to copy this exactly because, I mean, this doesn't look perfect anyways, but just keep on trying. The only way you can improve at this is more practice, so just take some time and try to model out more like armor sections for this robot, I guess. Okay, so if you enjoyed this tutorial and you found it useful, please drop a like and subscribe if you want to see more of my content. I'll see you in the next one. Bye!